Good morning and welcome back to the second segment of Talking with Rabbi Ted on KPCALP Petaluma, California. Here at our studios for our second segment, I'd like to welcome Vasanti Jayaswal as our guest for the second segment. It's good to see you here today.
Good morning and thank you.
Thank you, yes. So, Vasanti, I've known for a few years and have a privilege of a monthly interfaith, intercultural group to share with her and other pieces of the world out here in Petaluma. My friend Jim, who's working the boards here next to me, apparently knows this person for a while.
Indeed.
And so you're in familiar territory. Mm-hmm. So don't be intimidated by these microphones and earphones.
Yeah.
You're just talking to us, right? It's okay. It's good. So I like to start out with telling me a little bit about your background and a bit of your resume of life, and then we'll start talking about some of the things you've been engaged in.
Okay, so I'm a composite person.
You are.
With several chapters to my life.
Uh-huh.
I left India in 1966. I was invited to be part of a collaborative parasitology work at University of Oklahoma. And then from there, I moved to Dallas, where I got married, and life changed then. Had the kids and stuff, and worked as a research librarian because I didn't want to cut any more animals out for what I was doing, And then it was family, and then we moved to New Jersey, and then to Los Angeles. The longest I have lived is in Los Angeles. And then I miss my culture so much, so I dropped my science background, went back to my parents and my other background, which is performing arts. So I had an Academy of Arts in Los Angeles, and we had lots and lots of students, and we took them to India for tours, and they did a marvelous job. And then as that was dwindling, I decided I'll go and get some units in child education because I missed being with kids. So I had heritage schools, 6 of them for Indian kids, and then worked as an enrichment counselor sort of in the elementary schools in West LA. So that's my LA chapter. And then with the passing of my husband, I moved to Sonoma County to be closer to my younger son. And it's a different life now.
It is. And how long have you been here?
This is my 10th year.
10th year.
Yes.
Okay, 10th year. So Jim could not have known you for 12 years. That's right. Maybe, unless in some other way that knowledge is possible. All right. Well, it's great. And I know you've done, I know you most in parts of your spiritual journeys and looking at you mentioned you're a composite person and that your life has had these different chapters. But don't you think these chapters all come together at this stage?
There's a thread that goes through all the chapters, but the actual pages have been turned and I don't tend to go back.
Okay.
So.
Okay. What is that thread?
It's the love of the divine.
And what is your understanding of that?
Right now, the understanding has changed since before because I was more into the personal aspect of God. But now it's a presence, but I still can relate to the personal. But deep inside of me, it's the presence. And so that has changed over the years.
So in the Indian traditions from which you come, what is that presence of the divine like? Is that the one you're relying upon now, or is it some step forward from it? But let's go back to that one first. What is the root? In Hinduism, was it Hinduism of which you were a part?
Yes, I was. Yeah, so, and I still am.
Right.
So,
You would identify if somebody asked you? Would you say
I'll say I'm a Hindu. Right. Okay. I'll say I'm a Hindu with a difference. So.
Yeah, Hindu with a difference. And that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. So could you give us some basics of the Hinduism?
Growing up, I've been exposed to both the ritualistic aspect of Hinduism and also the philosophy. When you get into the philosophy, then you go more into the presence. And you don't drop the other one, but in your personal life, you don't do as much as you would do if you were still with, say, the concept of God with attributes. Then you would have the rituals and stuff like that. When we move from the concept of the divine into a presence and not necessarily attributes, then you don't do as much of the rituals.
Could you clarify that notion of God with attributes? What do you mean by attributes?
That means God is all loving, compassionate, and all of that. So we try to put human traits onto God, and then you come to another level when then. In India, for instance, they identify with different characters in the scriptures, and they try to identify as that being God. And that's okay for those who feel that way. I'm okay with that. But I know it's much more than that and goes beyond that. So does that make sense?
Well, it's beginning to make sense. I mean, I know it makes sense for you, and I would like our listening audience to be able to get a sense of what Hinduism is about, just like I have the opportunity to interview people from my tradition, from the Christian tradition. So if you were to go to India today and like people would say America is majority Christian. So I assume that India is majority Hindu.
Right.
And there are Hindu temples everywhere, right? And rituals.
Right.
Icons?
Yes.
A lot of Hindu icons around. Right. And from these traditions, you have derived your spiritual life and the underpinnings. So what would you say are the key tenets of the philosophy that you're talking about?
See, my take on it would be more that I can train people what they have to do with regard to icons and temples. But I don't go to temples anymore.
Right.
Because I can't stand it anymore. Okay. That's the truth. So, but if somebody's at the level of temples and they want to worship, I've been trained to be able to teach them. So that still continues in India. Majority of the people are into temples and rituals, but there's a segment who are in monasteries. And they are more into the transcendental aspect of the divine.
And that is done through studying the scriptures?
Yes, studying the scriptures and personal transformation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, obviously within the Jewish community, people would say, I don't go to temple anymore and I don't do the ritual, many people, but I'm still a Jew and I follow this, or the values of Judaism have taught me are part of my life, etc., etc. So could we identify any of the philosophies of the pieces of the philosophy in Hinduism that still resonate for you in terms of the values and how people live their lives?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So could you help me with that?
Well, it's common to, I think, throughout the world, like, speaking the truth and not being dishonest. And one of the most important ones that we have is a human being goes through certain stages in life. And that's something most of us hold on to. Beginning of your life, you are a student and should be a celibate. When you get married, then you have the obligation to society. And when you become a grandfather or a grandmother, then you have to pull away and be more into spiritual, pursuits. And then the last one, which most of us don't do, is when you become a recluse, And so those things still hold good for me. And all the training I have with my ethics and everything is from my parents, and that's part of Hinduism, and which I think is common to the world.
So when you look at American culture, American society, where being single, not married, is you put on the family and then but being single is for many people in American society, a value that they hold on to. They say it's okay.
Yeah.
How does that do you look askance at that? Or
No, because that's the choice that they have made. But what would be askance would be, not anymore because I've learned to accept a lot, is when you are single and you're not married, but you still have so many affairs. that would be very hard.
Right.
I've learned to say, okay, that's none of my business.
Right.
But when I first came to this country, it was hard to accept that. It was hard to accept the slight lack of disobedience that we see in children towards parents.
Okay.
The lack of respect, and especially when they turn 18, it's like, boom, they can do whatever they want. All of that was in the beginning when I was here. That all shows my Hindu background.
Right.
And that it was hard to accept that, but I have.
Many immigrant groups who have come to this country and seen these kinds of changes, the Asian countries, people do look at it askance and are trying to figure out how to maintain their own cultures and how to maintain their own values in the face of this, knowing that their children and grandchildren are going to grow up more American than they are from their original cultures, and that's a challenge. What's the Indian community like in Petaluma? Is there a significant?
Since I came to Petaluma, I have not been very involved with the Indian community. But when I was in Santa Rosa, I was, and there's a large number of them. But I would call them the newer type of Indians. So if you could put, say, in a room, people who moved to this country in the 60s, like I did, and people who have moved since the 90s, put us all in a room, within 10 minutes, we'll all be like this, one group on one end and one group on the other end, because we don't have a lot in common.
But that might actually happen if you get baby boomers in the room with Generation Xers, and that the same split might take place. Part of it is age, part of it is culture, etc. So are you worried about the future of Indian identity in America, or is that just happens to be who you are and where you came from, but that these cultural identities are not really significant either for you or in general in people's lives?
Let's go for the Indian community as I see them. Many of them are strong Indians in the sense of they tend to just associate with their own people. So this is how they stay. Indians stay Hindus, and there's a small segment that doesn't do it, but the bigger segment still maintains that. So I'm not worried about their identity. As far as my identity is concerned, well, I happen to be a Hindu.
You happen to be a Hindu, right?
Yeah.
But you've dabbled in other areas of spirituality.
Yes, so that's something I really would like you to know is since I was a child, I've always been interested in other religions, other faiths. The common thing is their way of expressing love for God. That's how it started. And I went to Catholic schools, Catholic colleges. And I would escape during lunchtime to the chapel just to hear the nuns sing. So this is how I was thinking about. I had to put all of that in my head this morning. It's like I'm a free-flying bird. Having been raised in a nest of Hinduism, let's say, but I'm a free-flying bird. And for a bird to be able to fly, I would say has the two wings. One wing is of devotion, which in India we call bhakti yoga. The yoga of bhakti is devotion. And the other one is wisdom, knowledge, which we call jnana yoga. So you need these two wings. And then you have to have, the tail is music, chants, art, regardless of any religion, that plays an important role. And my little feet will be selfless actions, which is karma yoga. You continue to do that because you have to deal with people, you deal with this world, and you do it as much as you can selflessly. So that's karma yoga. And my head is into mysticism. Can't be without it. Can't be without it.
Can't be without mysticism.
No.
Any particular stream of mysticism?
All kinds. Right now in my life, I'm mostly into Turkish mysticism because I'm singing the songs and everything. But gone beyond that, Greek Orthodox. It doesn't matter which religion. I love all the Kabbalists. Okay.
That's Jewish mysticism, yes.
And I have to say a few words about that.
Please.
Because for a Hindu, it's interesting, I'm thinking. My husband was very, very kind. He knew I was into all of this. And he said, there's a Kabbalah center in Culver City. Let's go for the introduction since you're interested. So we went. And I liked it. So he said, why don't you go for their classes? I said, it's all at night and it's in an area which I'm scared to go by myself. To call them up and they said, oh, we have a class morning on Wednesdays. I think Wednesdays or Thursdays. Boom, I started going. Tell you, I have never experienced anything like that kind of instruction. Because previous instructions have all been in Hinduism. You know, where somebody's on the podium and they're talking to you, not with you. Rabbi Chaim Solomon was the other way. He would speak maybe 1/4 of the time, but he's always engaging us in all the truths. And there's some interesting experiences I've had while going through the Zohar, just I don't want to share now. And I found that all that he was teaching, I sort of knew deep inside. It just reinforced what was already inside. And I couldn't have gone through my husband's illness if I didn't have the knowledge of the Kabbalah and be able to go back to it.
Okay, so the question, particularly for those out there listening to us, what is mysticism? What does that mean?
I'll give you.
What does it mean to study it? What is it? What is this mysticism piece?
Okay, how about I give you a kind of a visualization? Let's imagine there's an airfield, and we have all these planes rumbling because they're getting ready to take off. And you have on them names, Judaism, Christianity, with all these varieties, and Hinduism, Buddhism, and whatever. They're all wanting to take off, but only one takes off, and that has no name. And that's mysticism.
Okay. So mysticism is in some ways undefinable.
Yeah.
But in other ways, it's a universal understanding of a relationship perhaps with God that supersedes all of these other traditions, etc.
So true.
Yeah. Okay. And that experience for you, and particularly in the Kabbalah Center, was a healing source for you during your husband's illnesses. Is that
not the mysticism. From the Kabbalah, it was practical tips to handling my own mind. That's what I got most out of it. Later on, as I read books, I got mysticism was part of it, but mysticism has been there even before the Kabbalah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Could you give an example of something, that a specific tip that a way you decided to think to try to help you deal with what was happening in your life? And if you can't, that's okay.
One thing is the martyr syndrome.
The what?
The martyr syndrome.
Okay.
I needed to shift away from myself. Not say, oh, look, this is happening to me. My husband is ill. I'm going to be losing him. So I needed to get away from that it's happening to me and that I am the victim type of thing, and concentrate. And when I pray, I would say, what is it, Lord, that you want me to do? What is it expected out of me? And so shifting away from yourself was one of the important things for me. I remember the rabbi, we had one session when we could have a one-on-one with the rabbi, and I remember him asking if you have any particular concern. And I said, my husband's down with cancer. And he said, I'm not quoting him exactly, remember, he has the cancer, not you. In other words, don't go down with him. Be there for him. Right. And be a source of strength for him. So that's just one among the many. But I use, every now and then I go back to the notes. How to use when you're dealing with human beings. Don't, if you want to go forward, like in a car, you have to be proactive. Most Indians don't like to, they don't like conflicts, and they'll keep quiet and not really engage, which means you're in neuter, he said. And if you do something negative and handle it badly, then you're going in reverse. But if you're proactive, move away from yourself, then you'll move forward. And it has always been worked for me. And the other interesting one is every time I fall or think of what was the last thought you had before. I don't care other people, but it works for me. It was either anger or frustration.
Right, so that the realization that our thoughts and feelings have a profound effect on how we meet the world
Yeah.
and how we deal with the
exactly.
world. Yeah. So you were able to use the mystical traditions, in this particular case, Kabbalah, as a healing form for yourself to gather wisdom. So Kabbalah the mystical tradition was the experience of the mystical tradition was a source of wisdom for you to help you cope with the various changes that were happening in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it reveals myself too. Like there are some quotations by Baal Shem Tov. I thought, oh my gosh, that's the truth.
So the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of what's called the Hasidic movement in Judaism, which was a highly mystical tradition. And Baal Shem Tov means the master of a good name.
Yeah.
And he had very insightful teachings to his followers about living life in this world. And wanting us to live life with a sense of joy, even in spite of the things that are happening in the world around us.
So one more I'd like to share, I shift from there is to, I don't call Sufism because that's kind of a cool thing now to say I'm a Sufi. I'm not a Sufi. I'm into Turkish mysticism. In that, there's a difference in the attitude with the mystics when they say Allah, as opposed to Haq. Haq is truth. And it goes above. And so I've had to, when I write the translations and I talk to my Turkish friends, I would not argue with them. I would like them to see that people mystics were persecuted because they identified with the truth, which they called Haq. So that's part of mysticism.
How do you think about the notion of truth? It's thrown around all the time in our world.
I think this was one topic that did come up with in one of the interfaith sessions.
Yes, we
and
talked
then I remember
it.
talking to Matthew afterwards. There is such a thing as a personal truth, I think. And that truth is sort of, you have to discover who you are. And there's a beautiful Turkish song that says, I go round and round and round. The only thing I'm asking of you is, what's my personal truth?
Right, as opposed to the truth for everybody else. Yeah, interestingly, I was teaching a class just last night, and the notion of truth came up in looking at some of the rabbinic commentaries on some of the parts of the Torah, that if people get stuck on the notion of truth, that peace is impossible in the world. Because the notion of truth then divides people into people accepting this or not accepting this, or this is the truth or that's the truth. So the phrase personal truth gives a little bit easier twist on this, because that your truth is, you're not waiting for the whole world to accept your truth and to validate who you are.
Yes.
So it takes a pretty strong ego and person to be able to say, this is my personal truth, but I can't really expect the whole world to be that way. Do you get back to India at all?
I go every 2 years. I do.
So what's it feel like to go back, after all, over these years? And I assume there are changes in Indian society, just like there are changes in America over the years. What's it like?
Some of it is good. People are more confident about themselves, because I think they're economically much better too, But the value systems have changed, and that's not very nice.
Yeah, so a little more Western values of materialism and corporate structures and stuff like that.
Yes, that's creeping in very fast, and that I become very sad. But when I go to the villages, I'm happy because the villages are pretty much the same.
The villages are pretty much the same. The smaller towns.
Yeah.
Do you feel any spiritual connections when you go there? Is there is it feeling I'm going home? What's home mean for you?
Home is wherever I am right now.
I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. I do. I just got this note. She's a great cook. So I've heard this before, of course, about you being a great cook, and we have about a minute and a half or so left. So, what is being a great cook is one thing, but since I recognize you as such a spiritual person, and that this whole sense of divine dominates your life in many ways, how does that connect to your culinary?
Yeah. Cooking is a spiritual act.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And I don't talk.
What's your address? We'll all be over there tomorrow night. Yeah.
I don't talk. I don't pick up the telephone when I'm cooking. And if it's a ilahi night, which is when I sing the Turkish ilahis, after a shower I come down to cook, cut the vegetables. It's la ilaha illallah till I finish, and I do that and if it's a very Indian kind of thing, then I would be chanting on Ganga, because Ganga is a purifier. So I'm always chanting when I'm cooking. And I love to cook. I love to experiment. And most of all, I like to feed people. I really do.
So if some of the rituals in the temples of India could be turned into cooking and taking care of the rampant poverty that they have there, then that would feel a greater mission probably for you.
Yes,
to be able to do that.
Yes, it would.
Okay, so now we know Jim and I will be over later for some dinner. It's good. Well, Vasanti, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the radio this morning. It's really been enlightening for me to learn about the culture and a little bit more about you, which I learn every time we get together for our once-a-month group, and wish you well, and thank you very much for agreeing to come here.
Thank you, both of you, and thank you, Petaluma, for keeping me here.
You're listening to Talking with Rabbi Ted on KPCALP, Petaluma, California.